All right, we're going to wait for a couple of minutes. Everybody come on in here. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for our 100 Black Men of Atlanta Entrepreneur Speaker Series. My name is Miguel Lloyd. I'm a member of this particular committee, along with my good brothers, Armand Davis, CEO of Paragon Construction Group, Dorian DeBar of the Decide to Cab Development Authority, as well as Rick Makerson, CEO of Blue Fetch. And so we want to thank you for joining us this evening. Today, we got our great panel discussions. We will have Kevin Gooch, who's a partner at Holland and Knight. Some of you familiar with the 100 Note. He's a former chairman, immediate past chairman of the 100 Black Men, but he's also a very accomplished attorney here in the Atlanta market. We have Alvin Johnson, who's a partner also with Holland and Knight, who is joining us today, and then Randall Hazelton, who's a business development entrepreneur. And so we wanted to define the purpose of the series in an effort to enhance the education for Atlanta's young professionals. The 100 Black Men of Atlanta is providing this entrepreneur speaker series. Speaker series on entrepreneurship is not designed to be a classroom lecture or provide you with any every little bit step that you need to consider when starting a business. Our goal is to highlight and hopefully alleviate common mistakes that often stifle small businesses and contribute to the creation of better prepared entrepreneurs that result in a greater impact on the business community. And so the speaker series have covered developing an idea, the power of relationships, raising money, taxes and finance, and then today we will cover legal and launching. And so let me introduce, first of all, introduce my guys. Hey, Rick, Armand, good afternoon, brothers. If you guys want to speak and say hello, I want to give you that opportunity.
Thank you. Just good evening. Very excited about this topic. Happy to be here.
Same. Good evening, everyone. So yeah, very, very happy to be here and to learn as much as possible from Brother Gooch, as I'm sure we'll get some good stories here tonight.
Absolutely. And so as we mentioned, we're going to talking about preparing your business legally and getting ready for your launch. And so we want to make sure you know that if you want to add any questions, make sure you drop them into the chat. We will grab some of those questions before the end of this and kind of give you an opportunity to get responses to that. We're going to hear from our dynamic speakers here shortly. So let's do a quick introduction of our speakers. Kevin Gooch is a financial services attorney in Holland and Knight's Atlanta office. Mr. Gooch focuses on his practice in representing financial institutions, non-bank lenders, corporate borrowers, and private equity funds in complex finance and restructuring transactions, including syndicated credit facilities, bilateral loan transactions, acquisitions, financing, asset-based financing, and notes offerings. In connection with these transactions, he drafts and negotiates loan documents, including credit agreements, security agreements, pledge agreements, promissory notes, resolutions, and legal opinions. Mr. Gooch has represented various clients in more than $20 billion of financing and restructuring transactions. In addition, he has significant experience advising publicly traded borrowers and clients in the healthcare space on credit facilities and secure loans. In addition to his work on finance and restructuring transactions, Mr. Gooch has extensive experience working with entrepreneurs and emerging growth companies in all phases of their business life cycles, from company formation to helping his clients raise capital through initial seed funding, later stage round, and managing our legal risk. Prior to joining Holland and Knight, Mr. Gooch was a transactional attorney for a multinational law firm in his Atlanta office with a focus on finance transactions and other corporate matters. In addition, Mr. Gooch served as an adjunct professor at Emory University School of Law, designing and teaching commercial lending from 2015 to 2018. Additionally, he serves as a guest lecturer in deal skills at the University of Georgia School of Law and on an annual basis. Mr. Gooch also is the moderator and host of Let's Talk Leadership series in the 100 Black Men of Atlanta, where he interviews C-suite executives about their leadership journey. I offer you and present to you Mr. Kevin Gooch. What's up, Brother Gooch?
Next Good evening. Good evening to everyone.
All right. Next up, we have Alvin Johnson. Alvin Johnson is a corporate and private equity lawyer in Holland and Knight's Atlanta office. Mr. Johnson focuses his practice on representing U.S.-based private equity firms and U.S.-based global corporations in connection with the mergers and acquisitions and general corporate matters. He represents private equity firms in the world's leading companies in a wide variety of domestic and cross-border transactions, corporate restructuring, and other matters related to general corporate and security laws. Mr. Johnson has represented corporations, private equity firms, and sellers to structure, negotiate, and close transactions across a wide range of industries, including manufacturing, financial services, consumer products, food and beverage, franchising, healthcare, and technology. Prior to joining Holland & Knight, Johnson was an attorney for a global law firm in the Atlanta office. In addition, Mr. Johnson previously worked as a sales representative for a pharmaceutical and biotechnical corporation and owned and operated a tax service franchise in Orlando, Florida. Present to you, Brother Alvin Johnson. Next up, we have Randy Hazelton. Randy Hazelton is a founding partner of H&H Hospitality. Launched in 2008 with his first restaurant, Randy has led the business development of H&H Hospitality, achieving continuous growth in food and beverage and expanding the company's business portfolio. He has the drive, dedication, and ambition to see projects to completion with enthusiasm. Under Randy's leadership, H&H Hospitality has consistently achieved year-over-year growth as a multi-unit operator with a portfolio of local, regional, and nationally recognized brands. As a testament to his devotion to high standards, in 2017, the company received a Restaurant of the Year award in Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. Prior to founding H&H Hospitality, Randy worked for Kimberly-Clark Corporation as a regional business manager in its professional B2B division. He also held various positions at General Mills in product category management, sales, business development, and territory management. His leadership extends beyond the private sector, where he has served in numerous capacities with local and national organizations centered around civic and economic empowerment. Sorry, guys, my brother's dog is barking at Instacart. Forgive me. I present to you guys Randall Hazelton.
Hey, good evening. Good to be with you all.
All right. All right, guys, hold on. I'm gonna mute myself and get him taken care of here. Sorry, guys. Let's start off with Randy, if you mean, I'm sorry, guys.
Okay, he wants to be on the panel.
Hey, man, it's real life, man. It's real life.
Started, and I'll take back over here real quick as I get him settled. Sorry about that.
Oh, good.
So I'll ask the first question. I mean, you brothers are extremely impressive, working with multinational corporations, these big deals. If I'm a small business owner, really a two-part question. How soon should I care about legal entity, getting my legality straight versus, seeing if this business opportunity is going to develop, but then also too from launching, what's the purpose of a launch? Why can't I just start and run my business?
I'll jump in with something that I always tell folks, and it's not just self-serving, it is a fact of the matter, as Alvin can attest, and we've seen oftentimes here. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I'll say that again, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So what I mean by that is at your outset, at your formation, it is so much better to bring your lawyers and your advisors to the table to make sure that your foundation is sturdy than it is to go pull something off the internet that doesn't really work and then build your foundation, build your house on a faulty foundation, right? You never build a mansion on shifting ground. So you want to make sure that your foundation is solid. And so something that may cost you $2 to $3 grand if you do it on the front end may cost you 10 times that if you had to fix something on the back end. And so I would say it is of vital importance that on the front end, you get together with your advisors and you plan things out and do it right in a way that you can sort of grow from there. And you're confident, you're sure that your foundation is a steady foundation. And I know when you come up with these great ideas, you want to get going, you want to just jump into it. But, you always have to assume you go into it hoping for the best, but you got to plan for the worst. You never know, one of your partners may not live up to your expectation. They may not know what the expectations were. You end up doing all the work. And if you have not built your house on a sturdy foundation, you can get in trouble trying to sort of extract someone or trying to address some of these issues. So I would caution everybody to really focus on having enough resources to invest in your advisors, to build that sturdy foundation and then grow from there, because it will cost a lot more to try to fix it on the back end.
Yeah, let me add to that. I was kind of laughing, Kevin, because I was one of the people that had to pay for the cure because I was so excited about getting my business off of the ground, and not having a legal background or much experience at that point launching a business. I didn't know better. So we kind of formed the concept and ran hard at it. And 2 or 3 years out, when things arrived that we had to address that caused for some legal structure, some legal, specificity, we didn't have answers for it. And at that time, we had to pay the price, which was way more at that point than it would have been on the front end had we started, as you said, kind of building that foundation. And accountants are the same way, by the way. Lawyers and accountants get those ironed out on the front end. So I agree 100%, and I'm kind of a living testament to how that can work out if you don't.
People think you can just go and grab some form off the internet and fill in the blanks, and they don't realize the years of blood, sweat, and tears it took to create the form and understand the form, and they just sort of take that for granted. And that's why you have to engage your specialist and your advisor on the front end to make sure that you get it right. It's not just filling in the blanks. That's sort of disrespecting what we do, right? We've been to school for 20 years to do this, and you think you just fill in the blanks. That's not how it works. So if you don't have the money to get your advisor together, you probably need to wait a little while until you get your money right, because you're sort of heading towards disaster if you get started and you can't even employ proper advisors.
Yeah, for sure.
One thing I'll also bring up about that, and look, Kevin and I, we worked together for years, and we've constantly dealt with the same refrain. When people start, everything's exciting, everything's awesome. When things go wrong, normally by the time they bring in the lawyer, someone is already done. And meaning that they've already tuned out. And so it's very difficult to then try to fix a situation when people have already started to tune out. To me, part of the big conversation is, how are we going to split the money when we make it? And we're really excited about it. So let's talk about that. The other part of it is, what happens if we don't make it? Doesn't mean that we're failures, but we have to know what to do. It's better to have that conversation when you're excited about the opportunity, you think it's going to be great, and you guys are still friendly, than to try to have that conversation. As Kevin said, the hardest thing to do is extract a partner who is not pulling the weight that you thought they were going to pull when you started the transaction. And the better you set out those expectations and you set out what happens, the better you will be in the long term for it.
Yeah, those are all great points. I'm a witness of a company that started, and partners had that split, and only because we spent that time up front. Although, we were very cordial, we liked one another, it's still a business divorce, and, people are going to have their feelings. Could you all talk about protection, outside of just partnerships and structure, but thinking about, I have this great idea. How do I protect my idea when I'm developing it, whether it's a trademark or patent? And then I guess you could also maybe juxtapose that to, what if my idea really isn't, I can't protect it per se legally, and I just need to own, market share. Like, how do you handle those two situations?
Well, let me jump in, and I want to throw the Alvin or Randy can take this, but I want to add one point before we move on from the prior point, and that is, don't do 50-50 if you can avoid it. Like, everybody's like, we're equal partners, we just want to do 50-50, but what happens is, now someone has a veto right, and if they don't want to engage, you can't do anything without them engaging. And so at some point you have to say, who is going to be in control that can make decisions? Now, I can give you economics, but someone has to be able to make decisions for the enterprise, because if it's 50-50 and one person says, I'm done, now no decisions can be made and the enterprise just dies on the vine. So you have to be very careful with that 50-50 split, because that means someone has a veto right. And I don't think people just think, oh, let's split the economics 50-50. But when it comes to making decisions, that means someone has a veto right, because you can't do it without them. So you have to really think through that when you're setting up your business.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I want to jump in real quick with a question, and because I do want to say Gooch is 100% correct. I've lived that. I could literally take over the whole call and talk about my experience and my stories with my very first deal. And everything that y'all have said so far is something that I did not do in my very first deal. And so from being 50-50 partners to saying I'll deal with the attorneys once we get down the road and end up tied up in litigation, everything that y'all have said to do, I did not do on my first deal. And so that's 100% correct. I wanted to add, because I wanted to, Rick said something and talked about it. And I think for the people that are listening that may not have an in-depth knowledge, I think it's important to distinguish between patent, trademark, and copyright. And so if you all would go ahead and give us kind of, what you say, the meaning, the definition of those things and why they're so significant, and then go into answering Richard's question about how to protect yourself.
So I think Kevin and I are probably both looking at each other because we're not IP attorneys, but your trademark is going to be your mark, right? So I think when you think about a trademark, it's anything that you'd see and it has that little TM in a circle, next to it. So like the Coca-Cola mark, the way that it's written, the way that you see it on a sign is going to be like their mark. Now, what you might be able to patent, and Coca-Cola is a tough example because I think their formula is more of a trade secret and it's not out there, it's not patented. But what you would be able to patent, I like to think about sort of medical devices. And so you'll have a doctor who has been working on a surgery for forever and figured out, well, if I do this with the screw and if I kind of tweak it like that, I can maybe patent this screw. And then anybody else who wants to use it, I can license out the rights to use it. When I think about a copyright, I'm thinking more like, you're a songwriter. I wasn't a rapper, but I did used to write songs. So the poor man's copyright was you put it in an envelope, you write it down, you put it in an envelope, you mail it to yourself so that at some point in time you could say, back in 1996, I wrote this, right? So your copyright is going to protect what you've written. I think that tax and IP are very specialized functions of the law. And so if what you have, and so you've got to figure out what you have, right? Do you just have a better sauce to do something that's already been done? And maybe what you say is, let me get my entity form, let's hit the ground, let's run. Do you have a recipe that you think people are going to pay me? Where do I see this? Yes, I see myself selling this recipe in a restaurant, but I also see myself packaging this and selling it at Publix or Kroger. You've got to figure out what you have to sort of figure out what you need. But I think that also goes into the original question about how do you structure yourself and protect yourself. I think what sometimes people think is, once I bring in the lawyers, once I bring in the accountants, it's going to be really expensive. It's going to slow me down. We're really excited. We got to hit the ground. Getting a lawyer to start looking at your formation and how you should be set up doesn't stop you from pursuing your idea. It just may stop you from making it public until you're really set up. And one of the things that, a good lawyer, a good accountant, a good advisor will do is help you structure yourself such that from a tax perspective, do I want an LLC where everything flows up to me and I've got to pay it on my personal taxes? Do I want a corporate entity where, I'm going to pay taxes twice? But I avoid some of the issues of me being an employee for my own company. Those are different things that I think a lawyer will help you structure. But one thing that Kevin and I are dealing with right now is we have someone who has a great brand, a great idea, and we're like, look, that needs to be in its own entity, because you may be able to license out. You've created such a thing here that you may be able to license this out, and that's a whole separate business from whatever it is that you're running. And I just don't think as an entrepreneur you start thinking about all of that, and that's why having a lawyer, having the structure, having the accountants is just critical. And it also helps you understand, to Armand's point, what's the difference between a trademark, a copyright, and do I even need that for what I'm about to go run out and do.
So I have a question, and Gooch, I don't know if you had a follow-up before I ask my question.
No, Alvin covered it all. I mean, I view like a patent is related to like some type of technology, some type of process, something that's super unique that is used to do something or create something. The trademark is like your brand. What mark is affiliated with the specific thing, that the service that you're providing, or what are you doing? Like that's your trademark or service mark. And then the copyright is like written material that you want to protect.
Got it. So Alvin, when you mentioned about the and I want you to give us a little bit more clarity on the pros and cons of the putting a song in an envelope, mailing it to yourself. You hear that all the time, as sometimes people look at that as a shortcut, I think. What are the pros and cons of that? Because we don't want people to go down that route and think that's just a way to circumvent a relationship with someone like you guys. Let's talk about the pros and cons of a scenario like that.
So I think, it only goes so far, right? I do think, back in the day that was sort of kind of considered the poor man's copyright. That's what people did. Technology has helped us in a lot of ways because it's kind of reduced the cost of some things, right? So certain filings, certain things that may have been cost prohibitive back in the day are not as cost prohibitive because technology has made it such that, you can get those applications filed a little bit faster. Maybe you can file online versus, having some formal document that you had to mail in. But what you want, when you want if you believe in what you have, and here's the real tough question you've got to ask yourself, and trust me, I've been an entrepreneur and I've done some bootstrap stuff that I've lived all the things I tell people not to do. But what you really have to say is, if I believe in this and I think other people will want this, I want to protect it with everything I got.
Right.
I don't want to slip up and someone tell me, yeah, you mailed it to yourself, but we don't, the post office didn't stamp it properly and we can't really tell what the date is, or it's smudged. And now you're depending on a date that you're saying is 1996 and they're saying that it's 1998. And, what can you do, Right. And so you want to avoid those types of mishaps. But as Kevin said, and I can't say it enough, even when you do it officially, you need to go to the right people and you need to ask questions. And the other thing I think I would advise, that's not legal advice, but it's the best advice I probably could give, ask other entrepreneurs, because every person on this panel that has ever done a deal probably has the exact same story about why it didn't work out, how their partner wasn't carrying their weight, how they tried to say something, it was too late, and then you end up in litigation, or you just end up never speaking to the brother again.
I'll just add, look, man, don't play any games, right? This poor man's copyright, it is some evidence of something, not strong evidence, some evidence. Theoretically, you got something in a sealed envelope, it was mailed, so there's a postmark, so you can say this is proof that this was done at this date. But if some big company has violated your copyright, they will throw a bunch of hungry lawyers like me and Alvin on it, and we will eat that poor man's copyright up. And so if you believe that it's something that someone wants, spend the money and get it done right. And even then, there aren't any guarantees, but that's going to put you in the best position possible. So just do it right from the start. And again, if you aren't at the point where you have the money to do it right, you may not be at the point where you need to launch your business. Because of course, the primary reason that businesses fail is they run out of money. So if you don't have money to protect yourself, you may want to raise some more money before you get going.
And just one quick point of that, sorry, because I used to be a litigator too. If you think about it, really, you're going to say, I have this in an envelope. It says what I say it says. Kevin and I are going to say, we want to do discovery. We can't see that. We don't believe that. And so now you're paying a lawyer. Even your lawyer is going to say, are you really sure it says that in that envelope? Because they're not even going to trust, but you can't open that envelope. And so how much are you going to invest on lawyers before you finally get into the right venue in front of, some administrator, that you open the envelope and we're all just sitting there like, it's like a Vanna White moment, what's in there, right? And so what you think can be beneficial to you can actually really be a serious detriment on the back end when you have to start trying to practically unwind these things and see what it takes to really see what's in that envelope.
And I'm going to say you used Steam to open the envelope and then resealed it. I'm going to say that the postmark is, we're going to throw everything at it. So if you want to do it right, because if not, we will eat you up. I mean, that's just the fact of the matter. And another important thing that Alvin said, right, that all entrepreneurs need to know is that all lawyers are not created equal. So if you're going into business with someone and they say, hey, man, my cousin is a personal injury lawyer, we should let them draft this operating agreement, run. Don't do that. All lawyers are not created equal. So when you are trying to do this right, you know, there are different tiers of law firms, right? There's some that are super expensive. There's some that are somewhat expensive. And there's some smaller firms with talented people that used to work at the big firms that may not be as expensive. So you can try to find the right fit for you, but you want to ask questions like, how many of these have you done? Can we talk to someone that has worked with you on one of these so we understand you aren't just, you know, blowing smoke? But don't be the first one with someone that's never drafted an operating agreement before, drafting some complex operating agreement with 5 partners and all these buy-sell mechanics, because you're going to get sued and you're going to end up fighting over, and it's not going to be clear.
That's great insight, guys, for sure. I think that's something that people trying to go the short route and shortcuts, and you guys just laid out a lot of scenarios that will cost people a lot of money and a lot of heartache. So great feedback. Can we pivot and let's talk to our brother in the hospitality business, because we just came out of, Randy, you just came out of a season where your business had to deal with COVID, right? And can you talk to us a little bit about, from the restaurant community and the hospitality community, how that has affected your business, how you maintain and how you excel during this time?
Yeah, it was a tough time, and all of my restaurants happened to be in airports. We were in Atlanta, Texas, and Washington, D.C. And as you guys know, people stopped traveling. I mean, it was shut down. We were quarantined, so airports looked like ghost towns. Now, mind you, we got 18 locations across 3 stores with employees that are dependent upon these jobs, and we got no customers to support the business. And a lot of hard decisions had to be made. I mean, which included, we had to lean out a bit. We had to close down some stores because we had no traffic to generate revenue. We had to figure out what we could do with the footprints we had and maybe still support some of the traffic that was coming to some of the airports. So that meant we were reducing menu, we were reducing shifts, we reduced hours. I mean, we really had to lean out a lot. And then on the kind of leasor side, we had to talk to our local municipalities and say, hey, we're having a hard time. People aren't flying. We need to work as partners to figure out how we can offset some of the impacts of COVID. That included renegotiating lease rates. That included renegotiating some of the other fees we pay, like storage, like marketing fees. I'm a franchisee to a few brands, so we would call the brand and say, hey, I know our royalty is 6%. For the next 6 months, we need to be looking at 2 or 3%, so that we can stay insulated enough to when we get on the backside of COVID, we got enough footing under us to ramp back up and be solid again. So it really was, you talk about tightening the belt and being nimble and agile in those environments. That was a real exercise in doing it. And that's essentially what it was, because we couldn't do anything on the top line. Customers weren't there. It was all about what can we adjust on the bottom line. One of the good things that came out of that is we learned how to do a lot more with a lot less. And some of the changes that we made during that time are going to end up being permanent because it created for greater efficiency. So there was some silver lining in that. But yeah, to answer your question, I mean, getting through that is we had to be nimble. We had to scale down, and we had to work with our partners, brands, cities, airports, around how we could offset some of these costs.
So a lot of the restaurants that are in communities have made the adjustment. You have the delivery systems, things like that, which have kind of helped in the transition, but you don't have that because you're in the airports, right? So how is your business transition, you think, permanently coming out of COVID?
So it's a couple things. One is kind of going back to what we did real time on the ground in airports where our footprints are. And that is, how do we cut the fat out of what we do, from the menu, from how we set up, the back of the house and the different stations that we cook the food. How can we get leaner there so that one person can cover more ground? So we tighten that up and make that more efficient. Now, the second thing that we're doing is I was watching my buddies when we were, catching hell in airports because people weren't traveling. My buddies that operate, fast food franchise on the street that have drive-throughs were seeing record revenues. Literally, because think about it, during that time, people weren't going into dining, so they're going to the pull-up window or they're going to drive-throughs. And Chick-fil-A, for example, record profit, record revenue during that time. So that put me in a space of wanting to diversify where my footprint is. So I'm now in the process of concept development to place some stuff out on the street and potentially some additional franchises out on the street so that all my eggs aren't in one basket. So it was both getting lean and mean and efficient kind of with our existing footprint, but also pivoting to the environments that will thrive when something disruptive in the airport space happens.
Yeah, that's a great point. And so, and you answered the second part of my question is how you've diversified your business. And so, Gooch, I want to kind of pivot to you a little bit and talk about from the financial services standpoint, how COVID has affected the way your clients have moved.
Well, in my world, it's you sort of learn early on who the strong are and who are the weak, right? And so there's capital on the sidelines. They got to deploy this capital, these firms, private equity firms, venture firms. And so if you did well and weathered the storm, you had your pick of who you wanted to get your capital from, and because they had to deploy it. And if you did not weather the storm well, then you sort of drowned and no one was there to sort of help you. And so what we noticed is that a lot of businesses, to Randy's point, they figured out how to become leaner, more efficient, and they started to do more with less. And so they may not have been bringing in sort of the dollars that they were pre-COVID, but they figured out how to do things a lot cheaper. So the profits were actually there. And then some businesses were able to sort of transform themselves to make themselves even more profitable, like the restaurant industry, right on the street. If you only have your drive-through open, you don't have to pay for people to be working the dining room, and you can just become much more efficient. You can move people a lot quicker. You can utilize apps and just really, Chick-fil-A just killed it during the pandemic because they figured out how to transform their business. And so it sent everybody, it was an initial, what is it that Mike Tyson said? Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. So people got punched in the mouth and then they had to find their footing, and then they figured out how to move forward in better, more efficient ways. And so you saw some people just absolutely kill it during the pandemic.
Alvin, he kind of spoke to your wheelhouse a little bit too, in saying that businesses that were successful, you had clients probably need to find people to get that money to. So kind of from your perspective as the working in private equity, how did your clients react during COVID?
It's funny. I think when it first happened, we all went home and thought, all right, it's a little bit of a break. For a lawyer, you bill every 6 minutes, right? So I track all the time, even when I don't want to. You can't help it because you bill every 6 minutes. So everything becomes a balancing factor of, if I do this, I'm not billing. If I'm billing, then I'm not doing whatever I want to do with my family. And so I think at first everybody thought, okay, this might be a little bit of a break. Let's go home. Let's see what's going to happen. Then everybody got really scared because they were like, well, what if nobody does another deal? Are we back to 2008, 2009? Are we back to 2001? What ended up happening though, and I think it's still carrying on even now, is it's the busiest most corporate lawyers and probably finance lawyers have ever been, because people are seizing the opportunity to buy companies. If they can find a good asset that's in distress, people are sort of seizing the opportunity to buy those. There's money. It's interesting because there's a lot of money out there at a lot of different levels, right? So there's money that the government helped put out there to help smaller businesses and to help individuals, but then there's also just money. If you're a fund and your date was you had to close that fund out and use all your investment money by 2021, you've got to use that money. And so what we've seen is a lot of deals that are happening still. I think though it's one of those where, look, if I had to be honest, the rich are probably getting richer. I mean, the people with the capital, the people with the exposure are just going out and seizing deals. Sellers are aggressive. They're like, when you do a deal, sometimes the seller's on the hook at least to indemnify the purchaser for like, things that they said about the business that just weren't true. And a lot of sellers are like, nope, I just want to walk away. You buy it and you take it. You did your due diligence, you take it. Something goes wrong, that's kind of on you. And so we're seeing a lot of those deals happening now, whereas previously a purchaser would have said, no, you got to be on the hook for something. And now we're seeing companies say, okay, put a little bit of money in escrow and we'll take it. We'll take the risk. So it did not have the effect, at least at the private equity level, that I thought it would. What I'd be curious to find out from Randy, though, and then maybe this is a panelist asking a question to another panelist, but it seemed like at the smaller business level, it has had an impact. And one of the things that I've been seeing through my own experience is businesses that were able to stay open during COVID, although they may be struggling, they're still here. Businesses that had to shut down, it was sort of like you had to restart. So if you let go of all your staff at the restaurant because you didn't have any customers, you're hiring back again from scratch. And I'd just be curious to find out from Randy, is that what he's seen with some of his friends that are in diversified businesses versus maybe his own experience?
Yeah, no, I mean, great question. I will tell you, in 15 years of being in this business, this has been the most challenging with respect to hiring people back to work. And the reason largely is the federal government came and dropped trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars on top of our economy to help offset the impact of the large parts of the economy kind of coming to a stop due to COVID, quarantining, people not going to work, office buildings shutting down, we're not flying, the whole deal. But that money ended up in the hands of people. Some of that was retransferred into businesses, which is why you're seeing wealthy people getting a whole lot wealthier because folks get this money and then spend it on things that go to owners of companies. And some folks are kind of sitting on pockets or stashes of money that keeps them comfortable and not having to work as much, or saying, you know what, maybe I don't want to do a shift from 9 to 5. Maybe I want to drive an Uber and make my own schedule. And so I think in that time, what's happened to the labor force that largely populates companies like mine, which are people that work as cashiers and cooks and managers, is that they've thought differently about how they want to approach work, because they've had the flexibility because of the stimulus money to do so. So we've had to adjust around that as well. How do we become attractive to people getting back into the workforce? That's been quite a challenge. So to that question, yeah, we felt that impact. Now on the raising capital side, you're talking about private equity. I personally don't think there's a better time in our lifetimes than right now to raise capital. Again, because all of those trillions of dollars ended up in places, and businesses have a tendency to figure out how to get to the money, which creates private equity sources, private equity kind of resources. So while we're having the trouble on the people side and hiring, and how we are looking at growing in the future and acquiring, brands or acquiring franchise outfits, there's a lot of money on the sidelines, to your point, Alvin, that's looking for good places to invest. So all that to say, you got a business that either has a track record or that is sound in its idea. It's a lot of folks looking to invest. If you got a business that's super people intensive, particularly the labor force that works at like hourly rates, that has gotten way more expensive. We might, our entry level onboarding someone to say work a cashier in the airport might have been $11, is now $15. So you got to think about what that's going to mean, both from a raising capital and growth standpoint, but also supporting your business with the people that are going to work it, depending on the nature of your business itself. So yeah, we felt an impact, some pro, some con, but we felt it on both sides.
Armand, I want to come to you because I know you're in the private equity space too, but before we pivot over there, having Randy, has that caused you to have to go up on your prices, and how has that affected the way the consumers are responding?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because if I'm paying, if I start someone at $10 an hour and you fast forward 6 months and now it's $15 an hour, that's a 50% increase in labor. I can't absorb that with the same $4 hamburger. So that means that's going to go up. That means the cost you're going to pay for Coca-Cola is going to go up, so that we can stay operating profitably. Consumers are not responding too negatively because it's happening across the industry. I mean, we really are in kind of an inflationary environment where we're seeing costs go up from labor, cost of goods, the whole deal. But in those same consumers, by the way, are tending to get paid a little bit more, because just like I had to raise how much I got to pay my people to attract them, they're doing the same thing out there. So it's kind of, it kind of levels things out, I think, at the net of it. And so I don't feel it so much from the consumer, because it is pretty broad stroking, from where I sit.
I quarrel with that notion, and I love to hear the feedback. I quarrel with the notion of sort of the inflationary effect. I know we throw that term out there, but I feel like we're missing that. If things were normal and prices started to rise like they are, then I get it. But we just went through the shock of a century where the supply chain was completely disrupted, and sort of demand is back, but the supply isn't there. So that sort of drives up the prices. So I'm trying to figure out, is it like inflation from a monetary policy perspective, or is it just we can't meet the demand, which is driving the price up because the supply chain has been disrupted with 700,000 people in the U.S. dying and millions other getting sick. And I think the gig economy has also played a role in it, right? Like, you have people that are saying, look, I can make $10 an hour working at Applebee's and deal with, some tyrant manager that I don't like and have to wear the uniform and work hours that someone else is telling me to, or I can just go pick up Instacart, drop off some groceries, get a tip, and sort of make the same amount. And I feel like there's a lot of shifting towards sort of that, because people can say, I'm an entrepreneur, I run my own business. And I'm just curious how on the back end of all of this, that the economy will look, and will people come back to work, or will it just be these content creators and people doing ads on Instagram and people doing DoorDash? I'm just curious how all that stuff works.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point, Kevin. And I think, I don't know that a lot of people are looking at it the way that Randy's talking about it. And that is, you had to raise salaries to bring people on, right? You can't pay $10 an hour anymore for a cashier. That means in order for you to still be profitable, you have to raise prices. And so, yeah, there's someone saying that's inflation, but really there are a lot more micro dynamics that are going on, and it's kind of happening all across the board. But to your point, I will tell you, because, dealing with, trying to hire an hourly worker, similar to like what Randy's dealing with right now in this phase of time is just, it's unlike anything you've ever seen, right? And I've had people who've been pretty honest with me. And one guy's like, look, one of my friends got a PPP loan. Doesn't really have a business, but some kind of way he got a PPP loan. So he's like, he used to make 20,000 maybe a year. He just got 20,000 that check. And so his perspective, and here's an interesting thing about it. He will say, I don't want to do a cashier job for $10 an hour. I should be making more than that. And so then you have to ask yourself, well, should a person have always been maybe making more to be a cashier? I'm not sure. Maybe they should have, maybe they shouldn't have. But I think to your point, it's going to be interesting coming out of it, because one of the things that I talk to when I'm, interviewing and hiring in a situation very similar to Randy is, I get it. Uber and Instacart are awesome right now. But 5 years from now, when you need to look up, it's like, what skills have you developed, right? If you do need to go get a job and you say, well, I've been driving Uber for 5 years, there's someone who's going to sit there and say, you haven't been doing anything, right? Because they don't know, they're not seeing your trip record, they're not seeing everything. And so, it's just a very interesting dynamic that we're in, and how this is going to have ripple effects over the next 5 years, I think will also be interesting.
I think the other thing you layer on too is the baby boomer generation retiring, right? Even without COVID, you're going to have a shortage with that generation sort of leaving the workforce. And so now COVID sort of exacerbated that, and the gig economy exacerbated that. And so I'm curious what the economy is going to look like in sort of 5 to 10 years, right? And it's a good segue to talking about sort of legal risk, because these are legal risks, right? Employing people, keeping them employed, monitoring like employment law scenarios, paying wage and hours right. You can get in trouble for not monitoring overtime and people sort of forcing people to work overtime and not paying them for it and getting sued for that. And so, I know it sounds like it's a lot of expense, but when you operate these businesses, you have to make sure you have good advisors, because I've personally seen 3 former clients get shut down. They weren't my clients, but clients of the firm or other lawyers get shut down because they have been making people work overtime and not paying them to work overtime. And, you are, as the business owner, you're responsible for monitoring that. So your employee can just say, they've been making me work 60 hours a week and not paying me for it. And then it is on you to prove that you weren't making them work 60 hours a week, which can be a difficult thing to prove at times if you don't have good records. And so these are like risks that you have to deal with as a new business and an entrepreneur. So like, again, you have to employ good advisors to keep you out of trouble, because a wage and hour lawsuit is not where you want to be.
Kevin, that's an interesting point. Interesting point that you're making, because now with so many people that are working from home, and so there is not that process of checking in, checking out, no clock in, no clock out. What would you recommend for business owners who may have 4 or 5 employees that are working all over wherever they want in their pajamas, but they are still on your dime?
You have to make it abundantly clear that when you work 40 hours, you stop working. Like, it can't be this insinuation that you work past the 40 hours and you only get paid 40 hours. And if you know that they're working over 40 hours, you gotta stop. You can't be sending them text messages and emails and making them respond. Because if they log that stuff, then they've exceeded their 40 hours and you owe them overtime. And so you have to, that the tone at the top has to be, at 40 hours, you stop. And if you don't, you will be penalized if I find out you're working over 40 hours and not logging it, to create disincentives for people from doing that. I mean, it can't be, hey, don't work over 40 hours, because you can get sued for that. And so there has to be this tone and this culture that once you hit 40, you stop. And let me know when you're at 35, so I know I only got 5 hours left. And like, you really have to monitor that stuff. And to the extent you can, make them, when you log in, I need to know what time you logged in and when you logged out of your system, whether you can check computers, whether it's emails or something. But you, as the business owner, it is on you to keep proper records and to make sure that people are giving you the information you need to sort of monitor that stuff, right? When you're in the building, you can check key cards. What time did they get in? What time did they leave? But you got to keep those business records, because if you get sued, you're gonna have the burden of proof to prove that they weren't working more than they should have, because you're the employer. And so the government views you as sort of the responsible party, the adult in the room. So they'll look to you to say, okay, well, show us what they were working.
So we have about 5 minutes left before we close out today. There was a question in the panel about talking about franchisors versus coming up with your own concept. If you have any questions in the panel, we can probably take 1 or 2 if you want to drop them in the chat or drop them in the Q&A. But who wants to address that? Hearing about the difference between well, I guess we can possibly go to Randy, because I know you've probably done a little bit of work in that space.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I was just having a conversation about this last week. I think, one, you really got to know what your objective in getting into business is. So if you're getting into food and beverage, are you getting in because you got a heart for the culinary arts and you really enjoy creating dishes, creating experiences that are unique to the way that you envision, a good restaurant, good food, and what a good kind of customer experience would be, good guest experience would be. If that's a passion point of yours, then I might suggest you follow that. If you're looking for an avenue to get into business and create perhaps an access to wealth or disposable income, I would say look at the franchise route, because the restaurant business is really, really difficult, and it has a high failure rate. Franchises are generally proven concepts. that have been around, been established, that are recognizable by most just kind of everyday average consumers. They have systems in place. They have brand recognition, so you have to spend less money marketing and promoting what this is, what a McDonald's means. They've done most of that work for you. What they do is hand you the playbook, they hand you the recipes, they hand you the systems, they hand you the trademarks, all the stuff we were talking about earlier, and they say, just run this playbook. And your success rate is a lot higher. Now, how much do you care about selling hamburgers or fried chicken or who knows? But if it's about creating a sustainable business with a track record of success and minimizing risk, go with franchising. And I will tell you, I jumped out there with my first restaurant and we created it ourselves. And we stumbled every step of the way because we were figuring it out as we went along. But I was in it for business purposes. I didn't have a background in culinary arts or hospitality. I wanted to build a business. Knowing now, if I knew then what I know now, I probably would have started with franchises and would have grown a lot faster. So I think it's really important to kind of know what your interest is and what your passion points are around getting into business as it relates to, restaurants or what have you, and follow that.
Great point. Anybody else want to follow up on that?
Yeah, I have a follow-up question. I know we talked a lot about, what the world is going to look like after COVID. Always tie it to the Marvel, the snap, folks coming back after Thanos that snapped his fingers. But me being in the tech business, running a software company, culture was really big. And so during that tough time, we were able to lean on culture. And that was our backbone. And for you, Randy, this is a question of, I think the number I read was 5 million people left the job force, but only 2 million came back. And so, thinking about hospitality, food and beverage, is there a culture change going on now that, me being on the outside looking in, I'm not recognizing, but is happening to encourage those people who, may want to work for Instacart, to come work for that brand or be a part of that brand, or to attract them, to that concept?
Yes. The short story is that the culture change is around how we pay and incentivize employees. So folks are given more money to work the same job. We were doing things like, you stay for 45 days, you get a retention bonus. And so folks are getting paid more. And I think generally the culture of companies are becoming a little bit more people-centric, trying to be more of a place where folks want to work. So I think that's one side of it. I think what is also changing on the business side is that folks are figuring out how to do more with less people. You have Kentucky Fried Chicken, for example, rolling out a fully automated Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurant, fast food, where, you have burger places that have robotic burger flippers. And what's happening is that these jobs are going to it was already happening. We saw automation and AI and all that happening. I think that poured accelerant on it. In the context of, how can we create and maintain a fully self-sustained system? And that's going to bring in more machines. So I think you're seeing a bit of both. You're seeing folks that, want to stay on the people side of it, job creator side, figuring out how to be more attractive to folks, be money and the people culture of the organization. And then you have some that are saying, how do we kind of get away from needing people to do the same thing? So I think you're seeing it on both sides.
Yeah, it's a really interesting just place that we're at, right? Because to Brandy's point, you have to focus on people. Some of that, again, the boomers are leaving, which has had a different sort of mentality on things. And a lot of millennials are coming in and they're like, I'm not dealing with this stuff. I don't need this job. I'm going to do something different. And so I think, we say that it's like inflation and other stuff, but at the end of the day, it's like all of these interesting factors are sort of hitting at once where, you used to be able to rough up employees and they're just like, I'm an adult, I got to take it and I got to make this money and I got to pay these bills. And now you got this new generation that's like, man, forget this, I'm leaving. And so seeing how all of these things come together and work themselves out. But I know we're short on time, so I do want to say in closing, like if you're starting a business, like, you know, the things that you have to think about. One, again, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So make sure you bring your advisors in early to help you plan and strategize. And the right advisors, not the personal injury lawyer, not the criminal defense lawyer that's your business partner's homie, like the right lawyers and the right accountants to help you create the sturdy foundation, because you don't want to build this big, beautiful mansion on shifting ground. That's going to hurt going forward. And so make sure you do that and bring in the right advisors. And also make sure you really sit down and plan and think through the process, because it's not just how you start, but you have to think about how you're going to finish. And that can impact how you start, right? Like, what's your exit? What's your ultimate goal? And that can go into that front end decision of what your company looks like, how you structure it. So really spending that time to roll up your sleeves and think through how you want this thing to look in the end and what's your exit strategy. And making sure you always understand you come in with the best intentions, great ideas, excited, but you got to plan for the worst case scenario while you're still friends and while you're excited and while you're looking to go into business together. So if that scenario does present itself, you just go to the documents and it's laid out and it's easy to, you know, to deal with any obstacle that's thrown your way. So that's sort of my parting advice.
Kevin, real quick before we get off that point, obviously your every 6 minutes costs more than the average, right? So, but what sort of resource would you recommend an average entrepreneur to go do their research to be able to find that right attorney? Because of course, the personal injury people are on television all day, every day. People like yourselves, you're not advertising like that. So, what is a resource where they should go and search?
I mean, again, to Alvin's earlier point, talk to other entrepreneurs, because if they had a good experience with someone, then that's someone that you should talk to. You can always talk to people like me and Alvin. We can be straight up and say, hey, this doesn't sort of fit our stratosphere, but I know someone who does, who it would fit their practice, and I can direct you to the right person. And so just looking for folks in the legal profession, again, ask the question before you sign someone up. Have you done this before? How many times have you done it before? Can I talk to someone that you work with to make sure, you know, this will be a good experience? And just talk to, just get to know people in the legal profession.
Got it.
If you don't mind, I just want to add 2 points. One thing Kevin said that I think is really critical, and it goes to a question Rick asked earlier. What other things can you do outside of entity formation and things like that to protect yourself? And it's keeping clean and good documents. And so like what Kevin talked about with the wage and hour and things like that, or, when you and your partner say, this is how we're going to set it up, email him or her back and say, yes, this is what we just said, respond and confirm. So much happens via let's talk about it. So much, especially with younger folks, happens let's text about it. And trying to go back and find a text from 3 years ago when y'all talked about how you were going to split up the business, and then y'all started talking about, the next movie you're going to go see, and then you kind of got back to the business. Like, your record keeping is going to be really critical. And I think another point that Kevin mentioned about, talking to people, once you talk to enough people, I think you understand this, but sometimes if you don't know it, you don't know it. Every lawyer, the structure of law firms may make it such that you may meet a great person like a Kevin, and he may tell you, for this, this, and this, go to this person. I trust him. I know him. I like her. I know her. And then when you get here, come to me. And that's not a way of saying the work isn't good enough for me. It's not a way of saying, you're just not ready for me. It's really, understanding the structure of, as Kevin mentioned, there are lawyers who worked at big law firms who then go solo because their passion is, I need to have a rate where I can help Randy on concept one. Whereas right now, Kevin is at a rate where Randy can afford him. I can't afford Kevin. I only talk to him because I work with him, right? And so you just kind of have to understand that, and I think when you find the right person, when they're willing to be sort of that candid with you, and they're not just saying, you got a billable hour, I'm gonna do it. You got a billable hour, let me get that. Let me get that billable hour. Like you can kind of really feel what the people are, but you gotta talk to people. Don't run so fast that you're not doing the proper due diligence.
Randy, you
Hey,
got any
man,
closing
since
words, my
Alvin just
brother?
threw me under the bus, I got to respond to that, right? Because it's not that expensive. And just remember, you get what you pay for, right? I, I was just talking
He
to
didn't say his rate was low. He just said, I'm that good.
I was just talking to a potential client, and I told him my rate. He was like, "Whoa," and I'm like, relax, because at the end of the day, like, I just this month I've closed 6 deals that are relevant to him. The firm that he wants to talk to that's half my rate, they close 6 a year. And so you get what you pay for, right? Like,
Right.
the bank that he's going to borrow money from, they hire us to do their deal. They're not hiring the other firm that you're paying half the rate. So if you want to get it done right and efficiently, and you want the secrets, talk to me. It may cost you a little bit more, but I'll add a lot of value to make it worth your while.
Yeah, I think in all fairness, we all of us here know Kevin pretty well. He's very generous with his time and with his energy, and so we don't want to make him sound like he's the he's the money grubbing lawyer here, because he's not. Randy, we want to give you a closing words as well, brother, before we close out.
Yeah, man. One, I want to go on record and say I can also not afford Kevin. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, it's, you get what you pay for. And I'm actually dealing with that now, where I had to trade out a team of lawyers for a lawsuit that had to deal with partnership because it wasn't the caliber of lawyers to get me through this. So I echo your point. So I will close out in saying, one, yeah, start with the end in mind. Know what you want to do, why you want to do it. Develop a plan to get you there. As you know, Alvin and Kevin have mentioned, get your paperwork together, get your legal structure together. One thing that we didn't talk about that I would strongly press everybody to do is understand the budget, understand the cost of what it takes to get into the business that you want to get into. Because one of the worst things you can do is get into it without enough money, being undercapitalized, and find yourself trying to dig out of that hole. So get smart about what it's going to cost. And be conservative. No pie in the sky, because it's going to come back to bite you. I've made all these mistakes, every single one of them. That was one of them as well. So get smart about the money too. And lastly, I'll just offer myself to anyone. You're asking, where can I go to get resources? And I remember when I was starting out, I didn't know who to talk to. I probably didn't look hard enough. But nonetheless, if I had someone to talk to that kind of been through what I was trying to go through, it would have been helpful. So I'm offering myself to anybody that wants to reach out. You can find me on IG, just Randy Hazelton, first name, last name. Shoot me your questions, and I'm here as a resource.
So Randy, we got to echo that point you just made, man. When you come up with your budget, add probably 33 to 50% on top of it, because you have underestimated it being sort of idealistic, and you're going to miss the mark.
Great.
100%. 100%.
Rick, I'm going to kick it to you, brother, to close us out.
No, thank you. And I'm not going to try to recap. I think Kevin, Alvin, and Randy did a great recap, and I want to thank them again for their time. All these are amazing brothers doing amazing things out here in the world. Thank you, Miguel, for hosting, Armand, our other committee member. So just look for us on social media, 100 Black Men of Atlanta, whether that's on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube, where we'll be posting these videos. And we'll close out this, first round of Entrepreneur Speaker Series next month with sales and marketing in December. So with that, everybody have a great night.